Hello, and welcome to the Dissident Mama podcast. Today, my guest is Jean Andrews. Andrews is a retired high school history teacher who served as a combat officer with the 3rd Marine Division in Vietnam. He's a former commander of the Sons of Confederate Veterans Tennessee Division and current caretaker of the Nathan Bedford Forrest Boyhood Home in Chapel Hill, Tennessee. Welcome, Jean.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Well, I do believe this is your first ever Zoom meeting, right?
It is, and it could be a disaster of the maximum consequences, but I hope we'll get through it all right.
Oh my gosh, you pulled it off. You've been a trooper. I think Jean only does telephone interviews, and so he's doing Zoom for me. So thank you.
Well, thank you for walking me through it. I would have probably set the house on fire if I were doing it by myself.
All right. So yes, I heard you on the political cesspool last night, and you were bemoaning Zoom on there and technology in general. So we're glad to have you. Let's dive right into this. I want to get into the interment of General Forrest and his wife happening in September, but I want to get to know you a little bit beforehand and also find out a little bit more about Nathan Bedford Forrest. So history teacher, how long did you do that, and how was it back then?
Well, back when I was teaching, you actually taught history.
Mhm.
There was no political correctness or the counterculture or critical race theory or any of that nonsense that we have today. So I could actually teach history. And it was kind of funny. In my history classes, I had a lot of the football players in there. I also coached football. And so I'd be telling them something and I would say, well, now the book says, and then the football players would pick up on that and say, okay, Coach A, what actually happened? And I said, well, this is what really happened. So try to give you that information. So I taught and coached for 14 years.
Wow.
And then got out in 86 and went to work with my brother with a sports medicine program in auto racing. We started out with IndyCar, did NASCAR about 5 years. And then the last 12 years, we covered the American Le Mans series, which are the sport car endurance racing like Sebring and Road Atlanta.
Wow. Now, were you a history buff?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so have you always known, like been into genealogy and ancestry and stuff, or was it all kind of happening at the same time?
Well, it was really just the interest in history, in Tennessee history during our War for Southern Independence. And that started way back when I was in the 1st grade. And started collecting the miniature soldiers and then tried to find out more information about what really happened, and would set up battle scenes across the living room floor and things like that, and then try to make it more realistic and even make the figures that I was making and painting more realistic, and just really started enjoying going to the battlefields. Now, it wasn't until I got into the Sons of Confederate Veterans that I really found out who my ancestors were. Mm-hmm. And because you have to have one to join the Sons of Confederate Veterans, of course. And so started researching that and finding more than just one. And that really made it interesting to go to a lot of these national park battlefields where they have the large metal signs with the units listed on there. And I could look at that and say, well, Grandpa McGee may have come right down this road right here where I'm standing.
Wow.
And so that gave it sort of a personal attachment to it, doing that.
Now, are you related to Forrest?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
I had a couple of ancestors that served under his command, which a lot of people did. There's a very, very interesting book that's just come out recently in the last couple of years by Dr. Samuel Mitchum in Louisiana. And the name of the book is Bust Hell Wide Open. And that was Forrest's quote at Fort Donelson. He said, I'm not going to surrender my men. We're going out of here tonight, even if I have to bust hell wide open.
Right.
And so Dr. Mitchum took that for the title of his book. And one of the things he pointed out in there, that Forrest never commanded more than about 3,000 to 5,000 men at one time. And maybe a little bit more during the Hood's Tennessee campaign right at the end of the war. And that was probably up to about 8,000. But that was the most he ever commanded, usually 3,000 to 5,000. But during the entire course of the war, he commanded over 60,000 men. Wow. Because he kept having his command taken away from him and given to a cavalry officer, and he had to start from scratch and recruit from Confederate deserters and teenage boys and partisan guerrilla outfits and whatever he could scrounge up to throw together and train them and equip them as a bona fide cavalry unit. So he did command a lot of men during the war.
Now he came in low as a private, right? Or very
He did,
low.
yes. Now, see, he was a businessman in Memphis at the start of the war. He never spent a day in a military school in West Point, the Citadel, VMI, or Tennessee Military Institute, or any of those. He had no military training whatsoever. And he was actually against secession. He thought it was bad as a businessman for the economy of the South. But like Lee in Virginia, when Tennessee seceded, he threw his lot in with the Confederacy and walked into a recruiting office in Memphis and simply enlisted as a private. But he didn't stay a private very long. He knew Governor Isom G. Harris, and Governor Harris gave him a commission as a lieutenant colonel and asked him to raise a mounted cavalry battalion, which he did with no military equipment or anything from the Confederacy. He had to fund that, all the equipment they bought, out of his own pocket.
And that kind of speaks to his career before the war. He did not start out as a rich man or landed gentry or anything, right?
No, ma'am. He started living on the frontier, and when his family moved from Chapel Hill, which was Bedford County back then, it's Marshall County today, the area where he was born. And when he was 12, he moved down to northern Mississippi, or his father moved the family down there. But then when he was 16, his father died. And so at 16, he was the oldest male in a family of a widowed mother and 5 other children. So he had to grow up really fast and take on the responsibility of caring for that family, and went into to business with his uncle in Hernando, Mississippi, and was very successful and worked extremely hard. And by the time the war came along, he was worth a little bit over $1.5 million, which today would be about 40 to 45 million.
That's amazing. So he set his mind to something and it pretty much happened, right?
Yes, he did. He was very determined. But one thing I found out in all the reading I've done on Forrest, he was smart enough to know what he didn't know. And so for his commissary officer, he got a friend of his that ran a hotel in Memphis to plan, if you've got 4,000 men, we're going to be out on a campaign for 2 weeks. How much food do we have to carry with us? Right. And then he got a friend of his that ran a livery stable in Memphis to take care of his horses. Said, okay, we've got 8,000 horses going on this operation. We're going to be gone 2 weeks. How much hay and grain do we have to take with us? How many horseshoes do we have to replace shoes that are thrown? And so he knew where he needed help and didn't have too much of an ego to say, well, I can do everything myself. No, he parceled it out to people that were experts in their field.
So good management, which I guess is why he was a good businessman too.
Yes, ma'am.
So a little bit more about his time during the war. It was Sherman who called him that devil Forrest, correct?
Yes, it was. And Sherman also said that Forrest must be hunted down and killed or captured if it costs 10,000 lives and bankrupts the treasury.
Right. Tell our listeners and viewers, why is that? Give us just a brief nugget, an overview of why was he considered that devil and why did Sherman want to get him at any cost?
Sherman and the Federal Army was a lot more aware of Forrest's capability than the Confederate government was. They never saw him more than just as a partisan raider. They could carry off these raids behind enemy lines, and basically that was about it. But the federal government was scared to death, especially Sherman, that Forrest would break into Middle Tennessee during that spring and summer of 1864. Sherman was in Chattanooga. When the weather cleared in the spring, his next objective was taking Atlanta. But he was afraid that if Forrest got into Middle Tennessee, he would take out the Nashville and Decatur Railroad and then the Nashville and Chattanooga Railroad. And that would leave Sherman stranded in North Georgia with no supplies, no reinforcement, no medical supplies, no forage for the animals, nothing. It'd be like Napoleon in Russia in the winter of 1812. And so they couldn't use the Tennessee River in the summertime because of Muscle Shoals, Alabama. They couldn't get enough large boats over the shoals to supply them if the railroad lines were taken out. So that's why they were so afraid of Forrest.
So he liked to give those Yankees a bit of a taste of their own medicine, I guess.
Oh, yes, indeed. And the interesting thing about Forrest was he stopped Grant on his first campaign against Vicksburg. He stopped Sherman on his campaign to march across Mississippi and destroy the Confederate arsenals at Selma. He stopped Rosecrans on an attempt to take Chattanooga, and Buell on an attempt to take Chattanooga. And he never fought any of those larger armies head to head. He stopped all four of them by swinging around behind them and taking out their supply lines. And they had to turn around and go back to their base of operations and start all over again, or completely change. Like Grant had to turn around and march back to Memphis and abandon his overland route to Vicksburg and wait for the Federal Navy to build a ship of fleets to take him down the Mississippi to attack Vicksburg. But Forrest never fought Grant head to head, but he stopped him.
That's how you do it. So postbellum, after the war, he aged, obviously, but he kind of mellowed, and he converted to Christianity after the war, correct?
Yes, he did. Now, he was never, we want to make one point perfectly clear. He was never anti-Christian during the war. He always had chaplains with it. And one of his main officers, Major D.C. Kelly, was a Methodist minister. And Kelly commanded one of his artillery batteries. In fact, Kelly was the one that shut down the Cumberland River with his artillery the 2 weeks prior to the Battle of Nashville. And so he was not anti-Christian or an atheist or anything like that. He just wasn't a devout Christian. I guess he was busy with other things. I guess he felt like he was busy with other things going on during the war. But he always had chaplains around with him. They always served the troops. And he would always invite them to eat at the officers' mess wherever they were in the field. So, I think that's kind of a misnomer that maybe he was some kind of a pagan demon or something, which he wasn't. He just was not, really a devout Christian at that time during the war.
Right. And most Americans should understand that, because that's probably where most Americans are. They may not be, anti-Christian, but they're not practicing it anyway. I think that would describe a lot of America.
Well, he wasn't on the golf course on Sunday morning either. So
yeah, exactly. So I guess the only thing that people know about Forrest, if they know him at all right, they always go, oh, well, he was a Grand Wizard of the Klan or something.
No,
Dispel that myth for us.
No. First of all, they say he started the Klan. He didn't.
Oh, yeah, they do. I forgot about that.
Tennessee in December of 1865. He was living in Memphis. So unless he was using Spotted Al Gore's internet that he claimed that he invented, I don't think he could be in Memphis and have the Klan start all the way across into Middle Tennessee.
Right.
And he was never the Grand Wizard of the Klan. Now, he may have been a member at one time or another, but we have factual documents that General George Gordon was actually head of the Klan. And it was not Forrest, and that's in the library at Cumberland University in Lebanon, Tennessee. It's documents from Gordon's wife after he died that said that he was head of the Klan.
And I think people think of the Klan as this monolithic, huge thing that's super organized and, it's just really effective. But it was kind of like one chapter would be wild and crazy and another chapter wouldn't be. And it was not this one thing. And to my knowledge, Forrest got out of it when he's like, I don't know, they're kind of doing some stuff over here and over there that I don't like, so I don't want my name associated with it.
Yeah, it did. And it started simply because of the Reconstruction government that was imposed on the South after the war. And every document that the Confederate Army signed when they surrendered turned out to be nothing but lies.
Yes.
And violated, just like every treaty that the United States government signed with the Indian nations was violated. Same thing happened to the South. And they were told if they would lay down their arms, not take arms again against the United States and obey the laws, then they would be treated as citizens. And as soon as that happened, and as soon as the Confederate armies were disarmed, then the federal government came back and started imposing all these laws and restrictions and robbing the people of the South and turning the blacks loose on the white Southerners, especially the white women. And that's why vigilante groups were formed all over the South. It wasn't just the Klan. In South Carolina, it was the Red Shirts. In Texas and Louisiana, it was the Knights of the White Camellia. And in southern Middle Tennessee and northern Alabama, yes, it was the Klan to try to protect the people.
Yeah, and you have immediate emancipation and all these things where you just turn on a light switch and then all of a sudden the power structures are different. Yeah, I'm not an expert on the Klan by any means, but if anybody's like going off on Forrest saying that, I'm like, if you don't like the Klan, you can blame the Yankees for it. Like there would have been no Klan.
The Klan was started in December of 1865 in Pulaski, Tennessee. There used to be a plaque on the law office down there listing the 6 former Confederate soldiers that joined. And it was more like the American Legion of the VFW. Now they get upset about that, but I said, no, it's the original Klan. And it was like just sort of like a fraternity or a former soldiers organization like the VFW, the American Legion. And so it wasn't until the Reconstruction got so bad that it switched from this social organization into a political organization to protect the people of the South.
Right.
Never bring that up about how people were attacked on the street, robbed in their homes, the women were attacked, and somebody had to step up and do something.
Right.
It's not like our government today that just stands around and say, well, maybe we'll get the people out of Afghanistan and maybe we won't.
Right.
Exactly. People need something about it.
Yeah. And they wanted, the people who established it wanted Forrest to be associated with it after the fact that it had sort of been established, I guess, because he was so well respected.
Well respected and well known. And a lot of people used his name, and there are reports from different individuals after the war, but there's no documentation that substantiates the fact that he was ever even in it. And a lot of these reports were written years after he died or came to light after many, many years after the war. And so there's really no factual information that he ever had a major role in it.
That's crazy.
No, that's the type of history we have today.
Yeah. It's predictable, I guess.
Yes, the lying members of the prostitutes and the fake news media come up with that.
Oh, prostitutes. I like that. So how did you become the caretaker of his boyhood home?
They couldn't find anybody else dumb enough to go out there and work in 90-degree heat in the summertime. So, no, I was asked by the commander-in-chief at one time. The Sons of Confederate Veterans acquired this property in 1997. Now, the Forrest home itself actually had people living in it up through the early 1960s. And it never had electricity or running water. It had wood burning stoves and it had a hand dug well. And then it was just abandoned and used for storage on this farm. In 1972, the state of Tennessee bought the home and 49 acres. And they were going to fix it up as a little satellite park of Henry Horton State Park. And they actually started working on it. I'll give them credit for that. But then political correctness reared its ugly head, and the black racist caucus in the state legislature got all upset that they were spending money on anything Confederate. So they just abandoned the project. And when I first started going down there in the early 1990s, the state of Tennessee still owned it, but it had been abandoned and the house was just about gone. The tin roof had blown back and water was pouring in. All the windows had been shot out and weeds and trees had grown up around it. So 2 of our state representatives went to the State Historical Commission and said, well, look, if you're just going to let it fall down, why don't you give it to the Sons of Confederate Veterans that will at least take care of it? And so in 1997, they did. And I started actually working down there probably about 98, 99, somewhere around in there.
Wow.
Just to try to help work on the property, cutting grass, we had a professional restoration company that came in and started the restoration work on it. And since then, we've got a gentleman, Elton Wenzel, that lives about 2 miles from the Forrest home that has a woodworking shop and does a lot of interior restoration of modern buildings. And he was the one that did most of the restoration on that house and the barn. The old barn is probably 6 months to a year older than the house is. Now, the house was built in 1825, so it's almost 200 years old. And it was built by William and Sally Mayfield, and William Forrest didn't move the family out there from Chapel Hill until 1830. And they only lived there for 3 years, from 1830 to 1833, and then that's when they moved down to northern Mississippi.
Okay. Now, if somebody was to visit there, Are you hanging out there and giving people tours, or is it just something you drive past and you snap a photo of?
You know, it's got a gate and a rock wall across the front entrance. So, but I'm retired. I live in Nashville, and it's about 43 miles down there. So I go down there 4 or 5 days a week to work. And when I'm down there, I leave the gate open. And it's amazing how many people just come by there. They see the signs for the Forrest home, and they always wanted to come by and see it. So they drive up the driveway, and we have a small minimal admission fee. And then we give them a tour, or I give them a tour. And we have no shame. We sell T-shirts, bumper stickers, books, flags, anything to make it to try to help maintain the home.
But when you're not, go ahead.
Also get a budget from the Sons of Confederate Veterans as well.
Okay. But when you're not there, it's well protected?
Well, as best as we can. We are very, very fortunate to be in Marshall County and not in Nashville or not in Memphis. I think if we were in either one of those two cities, it would have probably already been burned down by now.
Right.
Torn down, and they would put up, some kind of civil rights park or some
Right.
nonsense like that out there. But we've not had any problems recently out there, and like I said, and we have a lot of neighbors around there that keep an eye on the place for us.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Is it the locals who are kind of making sure it's safe?
The people in Chapel Hill and Marshall County are very, very pro-Southern, and they are very, very anti-changing. We've had people that have moved in from Michigan or California, and they want to know why there's a Confederate monument to Forrest on the main street in downtown Chapel Hill. In fact, there are two monuments, one a tall obelisk close to where he was actually born, and then on the other side of the road there's a big medallion that gives his birth date and death date on it. And both of them fly the Forrest Cavalry Corps 12-star flag. So they've asked about that, and the people in Chapel Hill have told them flat out, if you don't like that, that flag was here before you moved here.
Right.
So if you don't like it, we suggest you probably ought to move back somewhere else.
Right.
And then it's also Forrest High School there in Chapel Hill.
Okay.
Adamant about that. They do not want the name of that high school changed.
That's great. That's it's like your shirt says, we don't how you did it up north.
They're normal people there. They're not the people that live in Nashville or Memphis or Portland or places like that.
That's refreshing to hear because I'm from Richmond, Virginia originally, and I know a lot of people born and raised in Virginia, and they've lost their minds. They're as bad as, they're scalawags, I guess. So they're as bad as the Yankees, because I'm like, Yankees don't know better, but Southern people should know better. So I'm really glad that
what they've done to Monument Avenue, that just made me sick when I saw that.
Yeah.
I've been there several times, and that is one of the most beautiful statues in the world, that statue of Robert E. Lee that was there. And then when they spray painted all that graffiti and vulgar nonsense all over that, that was just disheartening. But that's what's happened in all of our cities, New Orleans, Memphis, Birmingham. They're destroying these monuments, Memphis, all around. They're doing that everywhere.
And this is my point. A lot of people that I know that are good people, they may not have an opinion on it, but they're like, oh, it's just a statue. But when you come to Forrest, the man got dug up, right? He's not there now. Where is he now? You're digging up dead people. I think that's a line too far for even people who previously really didn't have an opinion on the monuments.
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
When they took down the equestrian statue of General Forrest over the gravesite at Forest Park in Memphis.
Right.
Back in December of 2017.
Okay.
I was extremely upset about that and swore that I would never go to Memphis and spend a dime in Memphis again, and I won't. But in the long run, that was probably the best thing that could have happened, because Edward Phillips and the Forrest family sued the city of Memphis, the mayor and the city council, that violated 5 laws. They committed 5 felonies, and they could have gone to jail for a lot of years on that. But they finally struck a deal with them to give us the Forrest statue and allow us to take the bodies of General Forrest and his wife, Mary Ann Montgomery Forrest, out of there. And we also got the statue of President Jefferson Davis that was down at the river at Confederate Memorial Park, and got them out of it. And which in the long run turned out to be great. Because if they'd been standing during this last spring when everything exploded and all the Antifas and the Black Lives Don't Matter to other blacks and all the crazies were running around and tearing these statues down, they would have torn those down and smashed them to pieces.
Right.
So as upsetting as it was when it happened, in the long run, it worked out for the best. So I guess you could say that God works in mysterious ways sometimes.
So there's the Sons of Confederate Veterans Museum, correct? Is that what it's called?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's
at
go
the
ahead.
Sons of Confederate Veterans International Headquarters on the grounds of the Elm Springs Plantation Home in Columbia, Tennessee.
Okay.
So you have this antebellum 2-story brick home, and just say 40 or 50 yards away from that is this brand new Confederate museum that's been built there. Now, that is where General Forrest and his wife are going to be reinterred about halfway between those two buildings on a prominent rise there in the ground. That will be on Saturday, the 18th of September of this year. And so then what they will do, they will get them buried, have a concrete vault there. There'll be concrete poured over the top of that. And then they will rebuild the pedestal that was on top of those graves that also served as the base for the equestrian statue, which we already have. We have the statue. And that's at an undisclosed location in Columbia. So what they're trying to do then is put back the statue, the pedestal, and the grave sites just like they were at Forest Park in Memphis.
Okay.
Before they were torn down, vandalized, and everything.
Now, before we get into more of the details about the event, because I'm going, so I need to know all the info, but where's his body now? Where that's in the undisclosed location?
Undisclosed funeral home in Mississippi.
In a funeral home. Okay. I'm like, where do you house such a thing? Okay. All right.
At a funeral home, and they, of course, they're used to taking care of that.
Okay. Just like it's all very morbid, and it's hard to wrap your head around it.
It is, but they were going to vandalize the graves in Memphis.
Yeah.
They routinely spray painted on the monument and the base of the monument, and the Forest SCV camp in Memphis, Forest Camp 215 in Memphis. About every 6 months, they had to go out there and clean all the graffiti off the monument and try to clean up what the vandals had done to it. So it's better just to get it out of Memphis.
Yeah.
It's like some third world country down there now.
And it's like the Lion of Atlanta, they busted off his nose and it's all chipped up before they took it, and they just took that down. And then as far, I always say this about Richmond, like Richmond doesn't deserve these monuments to great men, great Christians, brave patriots. So it is hard. I used to cry a lot more when monuments came down, but I've gotten a little bit of a thick skin about it. But you're right about they moved the Davis statue from Memphis. It's now at the front of this museum, correct?
Yes, ma'am. It is at the place of prominence at this main side entrance to the Confederate Museum. And they got the pedestal, and they set the pedestal in place and then put the Davis statue back up on top of it, just like it was at Confederate Park down on the Mississippi River.
Right.
So that's back, and it's all been cleaned and in excellent shape.
Nice.
It's on private property now. So that we hope will be here until the country really blows up and there's a rampaging war all across the country.
Right.
That'll be there indefinitely now.
And until there's the Republic of Columbia, Tennessee or something, right?
Which brings up an interesting thought. And we were talking about this the other day. Wouldn't it be ironic if Sleepy Joe is so terrible as president that he actually collapses the axis of evil empire in the North, and the South actually gets its country back? The empire splits up. We get our country back that we had in 1861-65. And the height of irony would be that Joe Biden might be able to do what Robert E. Lee and Bedford Forrest and Thomas Jackson and President Davis couldn't do, inadvertently give the South its independence.
Right.
So see, there's always a silver lining to every cloud.
Yeah.
There could be some good that comes out of Sleepy Joe being in the White House.
And, it sounds impossible when you say it, but nobody thought the day before the Soviet Union collapsed that it was going anywhere. So why not, right?
That's what I've said. When I was in grade school, we had to have those atomic bomb drills where you go out in the hall and sit down in the concrete block hallway and cover up your face, there's an atomic explosion somewhere. I never in my wildest dreams thought that the Soviet Union would collapse.
Right.
And it did. And people say, well, America will never do something like that. Well, you never know.
Right.
You never know.
Another question too, just say it, Sleepy Joe calls this chaos. There's some kind of decentralized, some kind of secession or something. What are we going to do with the Richmonds and the Memphises and the Charlottes and the Chapel Hill, North Carolinas? Are they going to be like cordoned off, or be like Lesotho with the rest of like South Africa around it or whatever? Like,
I think that would be it. And I think probably we would finally not have to be under the heel of the evil empire. Maybe some of our Southern politicians would finally get a backbone and say, hey, look, we're replacing our Southern history. If you don't like it, move to Detroit.
Right.
Move to Chicago or New York. If you think that's the way you want to live, we'll pack you up and help you move.
Yeah, we'll help. We'll take your George Floyd statues with you while you're at it.
Absolutely.
All right, back to the event.
Yes,
September 18th. Is there something going on before, after, times? And then I heard something on James's show about registration. What's up with all this?
Okay. Then the burial ceremony will be at 10 o'clock on Saturday, the 18th of September. On Friday, the 17th, the plantation home there, Elm Springs, the caskets will be there and they will be open for viewing, a visitation, whatever you want to call it, during the entire day on Friday, the 17th.
Okay.
And now in order to be there, but for security, people would have to register and go online to scv.org. When that comes up, there's a little icon on there for home, for the home page. You hit that.
Mm-hmm.
And then on that part that comes up on the screen, then there will be a area on there for Forrest Reinterment.
Okay.
Where you could give your name and your SCV affiliation and that sort of thing to get people registered ahead of time. So what they're trying to do is trying to make it so that a whole busload of Antifa terrorists or Bolsheviks or communists, whatever you want to call them, paid for by George Soros, doesn't show up and say, hey, we want to be a part of this. And go, nope, sorry, you're not on the list, private property.
What if I knew a person that they're not in the SCV, but they wanted to come?
Get somebody in the SCV to register.
To vouch. Okay.
You can register an SCV person or United Daughters of the Confederacy.
Okay.
Or the Order of the Confederate Rose can, and register under their name.
Okay.
For a family member, a friend, somebody like that.
Yeah, because I'm meeting a friend of mine that lives in Missouri, and I'm way out here in North Carolina. It's almost exactly halfway. It's an 8-hour drive for each of us. Her deceased husband was in the SCV, so she can just use his stuff. And then my husband is, but he's not coming with us. It's just going to be me and the kids. So I'll just use his stuff.
Use his name, SCV camp, and his membership number.
Okay.
And then would have your name added to that, and children's names, and that would take care of it.
And then registration. I mean, are there going to be bouncers at the front gate? Like we're going to have tickets or have to show something on our phones?
Yes, you can do it both ways, on the phone, but they recommend that you get printed.
Okay.
It'll come up on the screen with your name and information on there, and a receipt number on there.
Okay.
Hold on one second.
Okay.
Hope we can get that on the screen there. Can you see that?
Pull it back a little bit towards your face. Let's see.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's what.
Okay.
That's what it print off.
Okay.
So.
Well, it's kind of a sad cultural critique that you have to go to all that level of scrutiny, but I think it's very smart, very, very smart.
Well, we did that at the Forrest homes back in the spring when everything blew up and they were burning down Minneapolis and Portland and all these other places. We had some volunteers that came out, and the first night there were about 6 of us that stayed out there, and we took an informal survey, and we had over 600 rounds of ammunition: shotgun, rifle, pistol, revolver. Most disappointed people you've ever seen the next morning. They never got to fire a shot. So
right.
We were ready. So after that, we just had a couple of people. I'd usually sleep from 8 to midnight and then take the midnight to dawn shift.
Okay.
We never had any problems out there. And we didn't in Marshall County because the sheriff's department was coming by there. And they would send an officer by there every few hours in a
Okay.
patrol car just to check on it and check on us, make sure everything was going okay.
Well, concealed carry permits, are they allowed at this museum?
Yes.
Do you know? Okay. I figured.
Oh, Tennessee has an open carry law.
Okay, and that too. Yeah, that's even better.
Yeah.
That's how I have to go shopping these days in my county because we have a mask mandate. I haven't done it yet, but I'm like, I might just open carry, then nobody will give me any grief.
That's it. We've had 6 weddings out at the Forrest home because it's a historic site and people like to be married at a historic site.
Oh, that's nice.
Ladies dress up in the hoop skirts and the 1800s period dresses, and the men wear the Confederate uniforms. And one of them we had out there, there's a young fellow that I knew that had worked there before, and he was standing there with a big revolver and a holster on his hip. And I kind of eased up to him and I said, you know, of course, that the Forrest home is a gun-free zone. And he looked at me kind of surprised. And I said, that means if you can't afford one, we'll get you one for free.
All right. That sounds good. Yeah. And so I'm bringing my kids who are 12 and 14.
Right.
And then my friend's son, I think he's like 15-ish, maybe 16. So will this be a kid-friendly event?
Yes, ma'am. It will be.
Leading question. Okay.
We'll have plenty of security out there.
Okay.
Private security firms, and then we'll have some of the local police or sheriff's departments out there to make sure that if we need to make any arrests, they'll be there to do that.
Yeah, that's good. Having a sheriff on your side is highly important these days.
Oh, absolutely.
Anything else you want to add about it? I'm sorry, is there anything going on Sunday? I missed that part.
On Sunday?
Yeah.
No, everything's going to wind up at Elm Springs on Saturday.
Saturday. Now, what else should we do when we visit? Because I think we're getting there a couple days before, so we'll probably have one day to do something not having to do with this. What would you recommend for visitors to that area?
Well, there are a lot of historic sites around there. Just a few miles north of there is Franklin, Tennessee, where the Battle of Franklin was fought, of course, and the Carter House. I would highly recommend, if you get a chance, to call the Lotz House, L-O-T-Z, Lotz House,
Okay.
which is across the street from the Carter House, and schedule a tour with Thomas Cartwright. Thomas Cartwright gives you a tour of the battlefield, a walking tour. It's only about 200 yards down to where the trench line was, and about 50 to 60 yards back and forth across the Columbia Pike. I guarantee you, Thomas Cartwright will give you a tour that you will think you're standing on the battlefield at Franklin while it's going on.
Okay.
He gives an excellent, excellent tour. And so you can call the Lotz House and get Thomas set up for a tour. And he's got a great big canvas map. He spreads out on the ground and he's taking his foot and stepping around. Well, this is where so-and-so was. And then he steps over here. Well, this is where so-and-so was. So you get to see it as he's explaining it off of this big map that he lays on the floor there.
That sounds great. Well, I'll have to call him before I release this podcast, because otherwise everybody else is going to be calling him. So I got to get in there first.
Yeah.
Or he'll just do a big, massive tour with all sorts of people. That would be great. Yeah. Anything else you want to add about the event? And then I had just a couple more questions for you and then we can be done.
No, I think that's just about you've covered it. You've done your homework. You've got all the information lined up there.
Well, thank you. So, all right, you're a retired, former Marine. Give us your take on the current state of the U.S. military.
It's gotten pretty bad. It's pretty bad. Hold on just one second. Let me cut this phone off here.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is real, man.
I'll call him back. I know who that is. I'll call him back. Don't worry. And well, it's really gotten bad. Unfortunately, the upper brass in the Marine Corps and the Army and some of the other branches had just totally gone politically correct. And they are so concerned about this critical race theory and all the nonsense like that. I don't think it's really taken on too well in the enlisted ranks, but these people, one thing I learned when I was in the Marine Corps, there's a difference between a career officer and a lifer. A lifer is somebody that's just trying to climb the promotion ladder, and they'll step on anybody they can and totally disregard the enlisted men to get their promotion. And unfortunately, that's what we've got at the top of the military in this country right now. That Milley and who's the Secretary of Defense, Austin Powers or whatever his name is. That's the type of people that you don't want in your military.
Right.
They are not like Forrest.
Right.
Was there on the front lines. He led from the front and he led by example.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have any of those in the upper echelon of our military today.
And I'm sure you meet young people who want to join the military. Do you tell them not to, or do you just say go in and try to carve out your own, I don't know, space? Or
I do not give any of them advice to go in today.
Yeah.
I do not, because they're going to screw you over.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee if you're white, male, Southern, you're going to get the shaft every chance they can give it to you.
Right.
And this fiasco that's going on in Afghanistan right now is just proof of the inept leadership that we have.
Right.
So why would you risk your life for somebody like that? Now,
Right.
if they go down here to the end of my street, the block away on my street, yes, I'm going to defend my street, but I'm not going halfway around the world for something that doesn't amount to anything to this country. It's just nation building or whatever kind of oddball concept they come up with.
Yeah. And I think Southerners are slowly but surely realizing, their dad was in the military, they, granddad, on and on and on, that this proud military history. But, I have some family members.
It's changed.
It's like, it's not the same thing. And I think they understand that that is not insulting anybody's service. It's just, it's something different. It's not friendly to who you are.
It absolutely is not. It isn't.
Yeah. And so your advice on the military is good. And I absolutely, it's kind of sad too, not only like, patriotic duty and all that kind of stuff, but, you can learn some good skills in the military.
Yes.
And
training,
yeah,
organizational skills, things that you can use in business when you get out.
Mm-hmm.
You make great contacts. I've got friends that I served with or while I was in the Marine Corps, and we still correspond and call back and forth. And if any one of them needed help in Manassas, Virginia, or Oklahoma, or Louisiana, I'd be the first that went down there. So,
because it was a brotherhood, now it's blue-haired, crazy feminists and people who identify as horses or whatever. Who knows? I guess the last question would be your general advice, having been at this a very long time, to Southern Without Apology people. How do we move forward? How do we take the narrow path in this crazy world that's really at odds with everything we believe in? What do you tell people about that?
Well, do what you can for your little square in the world. You're not going to change the idiots that are running Washington.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to change people that are head of the military. You're not going to change the national broadcast, even broadcasting systems, ABC, NBC, CNN, any of those, and even Fox News, that claims to be conservative. They have no clue about Southern history. I've heard Hannity and Tucker Carlson just make some absolutely ridiculous statements about the South and the causes of the war. They're right on that. It was all about slavery trained also. They're no better than some of the other enemies we had. So you can't change that. And it's frustrating to ever think that you can. So you can talk to your friends that you know and set them straight. And we talk to people that come to the Forrest home and give them the information. Now, most of the people that come to the Forrest home are pretty pro-Southern to begin with, but they don't know a lot of factual information that they can refute a lot of this garbage that they hear on television or see on television and things like that. So that's what I try to do, is give them 3 or 4 little quickie talking points that they can say or tell their friends or people at work or in their church or whatever. Said, no, that's not right. That's a lie. That's propaganda. Here's what actually happened. And that's what you can do. And I know you know enough history to do that with your friends or acquaintances. So I'm sure you could do that. So those are the people that you actually have a chance to talk to that would probably be relatively reasonable and willing to listen to you and actually learn something.
Right. And I like the way you phrase it. It's this is something I try to do and I don't always pull it off, but you try to stay on the offensive. You don't give them any moral high ground because they deserve zero. I mean, they are nihilistic, Malthusian monsters that want to dig up people and kill kill me, you know? So it's like, why would you give them any ground? Yeah.
Well, the people that are Antifas or the monument destroyers or people like that, you can't reason with them. That's a waste of time, waste of energy, and you're putting yourself in harm's way to try to even get out in front of these people. Because I've tried that, and all they do is scream and yell, and they don't want to hear factual information.
Yeah.
They have their little propaganda lines that they just spew out like a tape recorder, spitting this thing out over and over and over again, and that's all they can do. They're so ignorant of not just Confederate or Southern history, but they're ignorant of American history. They know nothing about the Constitution, the Declaration, the founding of this country, and the principles that started this country, and they don't want to know anything.
Right.
They've had people, it was evil from the day that the Jamestown colony was established till all the way up till today, and there was nothing any good about it. But they still want to use all the inventions that were invented and brought forth, and the good lifestyle that's been provided in this country. But they want to tear all that down, or they think they're going to improve it. And we see over the last few months of this current administration, the disaster that the progressives or the liberals or communists or green deals or whatever you want to call these idiots, what they've done.
Right.
And, you know, like we said, there's always that good side. They may actually collapse their government.
Right. And they push so hard. And sometimes you feel like it's constantly, you know, devolving at a speed you can't even keep up with. But, you know, when people complain about the January 6th, you know, oh, you know, I had a friend who was there. I can't believe they're putting people in jail. I'm like, well, where were you after Charlottesville 2017? It's the same thing, you know, so wake up, because you were there at Charlottesville, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, yeah. In fact, our Sons of Confederate Veterans camp this Thursday night, we're having a meeting, 3 people from Charlottesville and 2 people that were in Washington on January 6th to tell everybody what actually happened.
Yeah.
Not the propaganda lies that were put out by the news media and the Congress and investigating all these things, and all the lies they've come up with. We have people that were actually there and saw what happened. And it was an attack. It was an attack against us conservatives in an attempt to just vilify anybody that had any kind of conservative ideology at all. It was done by the government.
Absolutely.
Government in Charlottesville, the government in Virginia, the government in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
It was a government. You talk about government collusion, forget about Russian collusion. This is our own government collusion that set that up.
That's right. Yeah, the Russia stuff, such a distraction. And I think people are waking up because, you know, my conservative friends, oh, it wasn't an insurrection, because, you know, that's the drumbeat, insurrection. I'm like, well, Charlottesville, deadly white supremacist rally. I'm like, it's the same thing. So I think people are connecting the dots finally. It only took the last 4 years, but, you know, whatever, we're getting there. Yeah.
Better late than never.
That's right. That's right. Well, Gene, I could keep talking to you, but I guess I'll be seeing you in September, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
See you in September. I think.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And I look forward to meeting you. And I really do appreciate you making the Zoom thing work, because I think a lot of people would not have even tried it. And you are a real trooper. So I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for talking me through it. I appreciate that. And we have to burn the house down. It's still standing. So I guess
that's right. All right. Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Yes, ma'am. Goodbye.